Hi and welcome. So good to have you here. This is another Ask Me Anything, and I'm here to have a conversation based on what folks have been asking for support with, especially answering the question, what's the hardest thing about raising your kids right now? What is it that you feel stuck on that's a struggle that seems harder than it should be? And that's what we'll be talking about today. Now, I want you to have a chance to get a preview of some of these questions, and then we'll roll into them. So here's from Erin. She says, as a new mom to a 3-month-old, I'm having a hard time finding common ground with other parents. Oof, especially so early. That can be really tough. She says, especially those acting as caregivers for my child. So now I'm anxious and worried about raising a child in a world that doesn't seem to hold my same values. Help. I feel that one already, Erin. We're going to have a really good conversation about that. Lexi also says, sometimes I wonder if saying no to certain things is even worth focusing my energy on with my little one. Lexi's little one is a year and a half at this point. At this age, does it even really matter? I got you, Lexi. We're going to cover that one. We've got 4 more. Any tips for motivating my children, 6 and 8 years old, to do their schoolwork? It's an ongoing battle in our household. And that's from Maprang. From Vero, I'm struggling to get my 9-year-old son to do his chores when asked. Can you offer any creative strategies for motivating him without nagging? Yes. Laura says, I just want to make sure I'm not holding my kid, my 11-year-old, back in any way. How do I find ways to supercharge his potential? Nice. I love that question. We've got you covered. And Carrie, last but not least, says, my biggest struggle is trying to figure out how to parent my 3 kids, 6, 8, and 15, with the parenting style that best matches their developmental stage. And she says, any advice? All right, we've got you covered. We're going to be going through these questions now. I want to make sure, though, if you're here live, which we have Gianni and Leanne. Hey, Leanne. And Gianni, welcome. Go ahead and pop a question in the chat or any kind of things that stand out to you as you go. This can be an interactive space. That's why it's Ask Me Anything. You can pop any question you like or just drop a topic in you'd like to hear me speak on. It's an interactive space. Same here on Facebook, streaming into the group, if that's you. And if you're watching the replay, you can just put replay, tag me, and put it in there, as well as on the YouTube channel. I've been having really great conversations with a few folks there as well. So rolling into the very first question. When I think of being a new mom and having the adventure of, really having to rediscover yourself and your own identity alongside getting to know your child and the way that they show their needs, the way that you can kind of like establish that bond and that attachment between the two of you. That's everything. And so one piece of advice I have for new parents in general, and if also please chime in if you have thoughts for any of these community members who are asking for our support today. I want you to think about how you can try not to make any sudden moves. Now, the reason why I say no sudden moves is because I have seen parents absolutely feel under-resourced, and in the first 2 years especially, relationships can very much fall apart. You can start to feel like you're like on this adventure without like equal thought partners, and you might be right, but also you may be, having a little bit too much, putting a little too much weight on a short amount of time because everything is so intense right now. And the reason I say that is because I have seen parents through the first 2 years over the last 20 years, not only in my immediate friend community, but also working in schools for 15 years and as a consultant and now a parenting coach. I've been working with families for 2 decades. And usually, not always, but usually the things that don't seem solvable during the first 2 years are actually figure outable. And what I mean by that is like you can come to some kind of common ground. It's just not necessarily the right time. As a matter of fact, even in parent coaching, I usually recommend folks to join after at least one of their kids has turned at least 2 years old. And the reason why is because you're basically just trying to get through the basic needs of the day. And this is not necessarily an easy time to, acquire a lot of new skills beyond the very basics. Okay. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't be like reading the books about the first 2 years and getting the pediatrician's help and enlisting support in your community. As a matter of fact, this is a time where you don't want to be shy about what you need, either for yourself or for your immediate environment. So what I'm guessing is probably happening here for our friend is that there's certain things that, you're asserting with the other parents and caregivers. And maybe they're not used to you asserting in this particular way or in this zone of life, or maybe at all. And one of the things that often puts a strain on relationships in the first 2 years of the kids growing up is that we start to find new parts of ourselves that are being expressed, and folks around us don't always know what to do with it. They're also struggling to relate to this part of you that is in this new role and maybe asserting yourself or communicating in a different way than you used to. So a lot of times there's an adjustment period. And I think at 3 months, you're probably right smack in the middle of that adjustment period. So part of it, Erin, is like, keep steady, keep asking for what you need, keep asserting yourself, keep expressing what your values are. And I would say, see where the chips fall with the other parents and caregivers, because, in the end, you are the leader of the child's development, especially in the first 2 years. And so you're the one who's probably the most attuned and bonded and paying attention in certain ways. And they need to understand that. And I'm happy to support you with a conversation about like some pre-gaming and thought partnering around, is there anything that you should be pulling back on that maybe isn't quite the right time to be asserting? But I also want you to follow your instincts here and trust yourself, and maybe find another like new moms group for the next year or 2 years to be bouncing these ideas off of, because I think you need good company where your thoughts and assertions and values land really well. And I've also seen people build community out of their moms groups. And if they haven't found them yet, then they find a group like mine where we have a year-long program and people stay in it for years because they're so connected with each other, where you don't have to do this on your own, where I have one client, for example, who said, one of the best things about this, she just renewed for a third year. She goes, it's like, the coaching is awesome, the strategies and tools are great, but what really helps her is that she feels less alone with the way she wants to raise her child, where she's empowering them and she feels empowered, where there's like shared power, where all these other values that can come up, right, that we are trying to emulate. And if you don't have if the other adults in your world are not even close to thinking in that way, then you need your people. And so, Erin, I would also say, like, keep leaning in and finding your people. And you can put questions in the Raising Our Resilience parent group in the free Facebook group as well. And tag me in them, and I'll also tag people who I think would be great thought partners for you along the way. But I do think a more focused group, like a new moms group in your area, would be really helpful, as well as considering a program like mine in the long run. Maybe when your child turns 2, we can chat about that. But I want you to have thought partners that can reflect back to you and affirm where you are, and also you would trust to nuance what you're coming up with, and check it out and say, is there some things that you should probably wait till later or reconsider. So, Erin, we feel for you. We're with you. I mean, there's so many. I mean, we have over 1,000 parents in this Facebook group alone. We've all been there in that tender time where you're just, trying to establish your relationship with your kid, and you're trying to make headway in like enacting your vision for what the family life is going to be like. And it can be a struggle. So we do feel for you and know that we're here. So yeah, please follow up with us. Let us know how else we can support you. Okay. And for everybody listening, I know that there's probably something I said that you could agree with, and maybe something new, but I also know that this journey is really unique, especially the first few months. And sometimes we also discover that we do have incompatibilities with some of the other caregivers, but I would say be watchful of that. Don't get despondent. Give it the 2 years. See, unless you're in an unsafe situation, see how it plays out. Like, people have their different rates of growth, when new roles are, sort of here and alive and well, as parenting kind of just suddenly you're in it. So give people some space and some grace to catch up with you. And I'd say stay steady in what you want and what your vision is. That one really hits my heart. Thank you for asking that question or bringing up that topic. We have another one, but again, Erin, if you need anything else, please lean in. We're here for you. Okay. So this is a great question for the toddler parents out there, and anybody who is running into a lot of refusal, ignoring, just flat out, being oppositional or saying no, being stubborn. There is a developmental need for children to find their no and really assert it. But then there's also the other side of it, which is a tolerance to being able to hear no, even though at this time, no doesn't make sense to them. Like, why? Well, there's more ice cream in the container, so why won't you give me more? It's sitting right there, right? And I do think, though, that your question has a question, like a deeper question in it, which is, should I how do I choose battles with a 1.5-year-old, right? That is a really good question. How do we choose our battles? So at this age, does it really matter if you focus your energy on saying no to certain things? So at 1.5, we're really helping them figure out how the world works physically. And so I'd say anything that has to do with physical safety or understanding how the limitations and the wonders of the physical world, get involved. Help them find their way with their senses, right? So yes, you should definitely be letting them know what's safe and not safe to put in their mouths, what's safe and not safe to touch, what's safe and not safe to like how that changes maybe when you're out on the street, right? Like you're heading out the door and now there's a busy street. I want you to build in the no's and the redirections from things and the explanations there. That's where you're going to get the most for your efforts. Now, other things like maybe repeating bad words, or like in the middle of a tantrum, certain behaviors are going to come out. Like I don't know that you need to get too corrective with a really young child. What you can do instead is help them find a way to communicate themselves differently. Because if there's one takeaway we all need for toddlers, is all behavior is communication. Because they really are now starting to want you to hear their voice and respect it to some level, that you're at least receiving the communication. They have less words to say than they can hear and comprehend. Sometimes the ratio is as drastic as 1 to 10 of what they can understand versus what they can articulate, sometimes even more. So, one tip I have for all parents of the toddlers, especially young toddlers, but as you're getting, you're just heading in there with the 1.5, is become the best toddler interpreter that you can. And so instead of saying, "What do you want, honey? Show me what you want," you could say, or "Tell me what you want." You can say, "Show me," and then can you point to what you want, right? Like using their hands. Just imagine how that must be, not having the way to communicate the thing that you understand on the inside. It's a very frustrating situation potentially. So giving them ways to get their information across that don't require a lot of words is really helpful. So gestures like pointing or touch it or show me. And then the other thing you can do is you can supply the words and catch and check in. Some of the best toddler teachers I've ever witnessed as a consultant and as a coworker with toddler program teachers who've been there for decades, and very successful with all kinds of toddlers, would always do this interpreter thing where they'd say, "Are you trying to show me that you'd like some more water?" Right? And maybe they're just standing by the sink, stomping, and it's or they're climbing on a table they're not supposed to. And it's like, "Oh, bud, looks like you really want to climb right now. Climbing's an option. Shall we go outside and see about climbing?" Or "Climbing's not an option right now, but let's find something else to do," right? So you can see how you're interpreting what you see back to them. And if you can get into a good groove with that, they feel attuned to, and they're going to give you more eventually, right? So I would recommend everybody out there who's not getting a whole lot back when your kids are, acting out or out of bounds or needing that no from you, try and guess what they're after. Like, what is their little goal right now? Is your goal to get up higher, or is it to climb something, right? Is your goal to get some help with getting some water, or are you trying to tell me something else, right? And just even just doing little A/B choices like that, until you get to something that they can go, uh-huh, right? Or nod or go, yeah, right? Then you're going to build that rapport with them. It's a really important part of bonding and helping them find their way forward, and you'll have less to say no to, if that makes sense. Last point on that is try to create an environment that has a whole lot of yeses in it, especially if they're being asked to self-manage. In other words, you're not like, they're not on your lap, or you're not sitting right next to them within hand's reach. So that's when a lot of times people will modify their environment, at least in one place, or hopefully more than one in the household, where almost everything that's within their reach is a yes. I'll say it one more time. Almost everything within their reach is a yes. And the things that are within reach are, there's at least a few different options that are interesting to them, or if they're not interesting, you go over and you like get interested, and then they'll follow and get interested too. I've seen it work so well in classrooms and toddler environments and homeschool environments, where they set up a zone of learning and they keep it interesting and they keep it yes. Okay, full of yeses. But there's also like ways to handle and not handle a thing, like a puzzle. Like, you can't stomp on it over and over again, it'll break, right? So there's also ways to handle it, the materials or the activities that will help them continue to be a yes. And then if you need to remove them, if they don't seem like they are ready to interact with it constructively. So hopefully this is giving you a few tips that you can roll with as you're moving forward. And yes, at this age, it does really matter for the concrete, physically based things. And also it matters in terms of establishing that there is a feedback loop that they get from you. So it's worthwhile, but I would, take your time to kind of fine tune which things you're going to prioritize. That's something I love to do with parents. I love to sit down and go, okay, what are all the things you're correcting lately? And let's pick the things that are actually a higher priority right now, and let go of the rest, and get really clear on those things, get through a learning cycle with that. And then we'll pull a few more things off the list, and then pull a few more things off the list. And next thing you know, 6 months later, a lot of things are established. And this goes for classrooms too. It takes time, but you can normalize a group to the norms, the rules and expectations. If you put in the work and you make sure you chip away at it, you don't try to do it all at once. Because if you try to do it all at once, then you're going to have a lot of all or nothing moments. Just let it go, let them do whatever they want, right? Or, oh my gosh, everything, I'm whack-a-moling. Right? So we got to find that nice tempo that works for you. I want to welcome in Alex. Welcome back. You've been here for quite a few Monday Mindset Moments and Ask Me Anythings. Also, welcome to Dr. Sheila. I don't know if I've had you on one of these before, so I'm glad you're here. Welcome. Feel free to drop a question in the chat. Really good to have you here. All right, so next we have another question. So, again, if something stands out to you that I say, it does help to pop it in the chat, even just to help the person who asked the question take notes, but more importantly for yourself, because I have a master's in education. I can't help but encourage you to do this. Please, for your own learning's sake, pull one thing out that you don't want to forget, pop it in the chat. And there is some magic to putting it into the community, witnessed by others, written down. It's more likely to stick for you. Also gives me a chance to maybe jam on a topic more deeply, so it really sinks in and you can retain it. I love doing that for my clients too. Well, next question. Any tips for motivating my children 6 and 8 to do their schoolwork? It's an ongoing battle in our household. Oh yeah, I love this one. So motivation is there's an art and a science to it. The art has a lot to do with the relationship between the person who wants more motivation from the people who are they're trying to motivate. So if there's a constant battle, that points to me to I would want more specifics to give you specific advice about how to disrupt that pattern. But definitely there's a dynamic going on that's a pattern that maybe you even have what I like to call an unconscious agreement about, that like it's almost like you are playing out your parts in a play. Okay, homework scene, go. I give a reminder, you ignore me. I come over and say, let's get started, and you have a mini meltdown. And then if I don't back off, then you really it really escalates. And then finally I back off, and then you get to go into your room and calm down for a while, but then I lose track of time, and you don't have to do your homework for another half hour, and then we start all over again, or whatever it is. So if there's a pattern, and this goes for any power struggle, not just homework with 6 and 8-year-olds, if there's a pattern, really re-examine your role, because they're now counting on the pattern. So what probably needs to change first isn't what they do, but what you do or don't, or no longer do. So it calls for a change in approach when I hear something like constant battle. So I'm glad you're seeking for support for that, but I just want to acknowledge that there's probably some unconscious agreement about how this is going to be a battle. So one thing you can do with 6 and 8-year-olds, which is lovely, is you can sit down and you can just name it. Hey, I don't know about you, but I really don't like how it goes when when it's time for you to do your homework. I just feel like we're immediately in a battleground, and it's really unpleasant. You get upset, I get upset. And I don't want to do that anymore. And you can ask, like, how has it been for you, and see what they could say. Yeah, just homework really sucks, or whatever they end up saying. You're always so bossy, or just let them say it. Get into their world a bit about what they like and don't like about how it's going too. And even in a way, like, commiserate with them, like empathize for yourself and for them, that this is hard and it doesn't need to be so hard. So that's where I'd start. And that's because that's the relational piece of the motivation. It's hard to introduce new techniques of motivation into a dynamic that is contentious. Okay. Even if it's only contentious in this area, it's just very challenging. So you've got to get kind of on the same side of the problem together. And so you might need to do 2 or 3 of these conversations where you're just kind of reaching this commiserating part of like, oh, why is homework such a drag when we try, it seems I want to help, but it doesn't help. And then you get upset, and then it doesn't get done, or you do it, but you're mad when you're doing it. And I don't think you're learning much. And just just be okay with the mess for a minute and talking about it openly, because that builds trust. And when you have trust, then you can start to shift into things like problem solving. But one of the things that parents sometimes do is they'll either stop right there and they never get to the problem solving, or they'll skip over that step and try to fix it. But how many of you like to have somebody fix things for you when you are already in a power struggle with them? Like, it's not a very receptive state. At least I don't feel it, right? I'm not like, oh, good idea, person I'm really mad at. It doesn't really come together. As a matter of fact, like, anger is very activating, usually in the opposite direction of the trigger. So it's like, you're going to do that. Well, I'm going to do the you asking me, I'm going to do the opposite, right? That's like the power struggle, pushing back and forth and butting heads and things. Okay, so commiserate, and then say, I bet we can come up with a better way. We're smart. We have good ideas. There are other parts of the day that go well. Like, let's think about those. And then you can brainstorm from what's working. It's like, well, how come it's not that big of a deal for us to like set up the table for dinner and clean up together, or cook together, or whatever it is that's going well. Especially because I'm noticing from my Maprang, like, there was only one thing, right, that she was one thing that she was pointing out is the issue is the homework. So I'm guessing there are other areas that you can pull from together that will create, like an atmosphere of like, oh, this is maybe a new way is possible. Okay. I'm not going to go into what motivates 6 to 8-year-olds once you get the relational piece solved at this moment, but I'm going to pull it in for another question. So that's a great place to start if you feel like there are constant battles for anything that's ongoing, like a pattern like that. I also have Dr. Sheila's question. She says, nice to be here. Thank you. How do you navigate the sometimes overconfident 4-year-old? Okay. So I'm guessing overconfident to me, like immediately what it brings to mind is like they will maybe do things that are unsafe or risky. So let me know, Dr. Sheila, in the chat if you would. Yeah, let me know because I want to know what kind of overconfidence. um, and okay, so let me speak to that just in case it is that, or for anyone who's listening, who that's what it is. So oftentimes we do have to make strong impressions on our kids about what's okay and what's not okay. And it's not my go-to. It's not something I do right away. Usually I first try explaining, um, like doing it the safe way together and reiterating, hey, remember we previewed that when we go out the gate and it's time to be on the sidewalk that you hold my hand. Do you remember why? Yeah, that's because, right? And you explain about safety and you can even like watch the cars go by and say, look how fast they're going. Wouldn't that hurt if you got, if we bumped into one of those cars, that would be really uncomfortable. We might even get really hurt and have to go to the doctor. It's really okay to walk them through it if like just the simple requests aren't quite doing it, right? Um, I've had parents also demonstrate, and this is where like if it's really not work, part one is you really try just explaining and seeing if you can get through to them that way with some repetitious, events. But then you can demonstrate. And I have had a parent put like a doll out in the street and wait till a car and sit and watch and wait till a car runs it over. And you go like, go check on the doll. And it's like not in good shape. And sometimes kids do need those kinds of like sort of like aha, like demonstrations of like, oh, um, that's a little dramatic, but I think it's something that you can really get an impression, through to a child who is being a little bit, hard-headed about knowing more than really, because you're telling them, hey, with my, you have limited life knowledge. I have a lot of life knowledge. I have a lot of life experience, and I'm lending you my life experience by explaining that the street is not safe. um, or you can't just like throw yourself into the pool, like, right? You can't run by the pool because you could fall in, and you're ignoring me, right? So it's like, all right, well, if that's not it, then I'm going to show you and hopefully that'll really make an impression on you. So one of the ones I would always do with my littlest ones in my first, second, and third grade, it was always the first graders that I had to watch out for, is that we had these heavy doors for the classroom. And in the door jamb, there was the opportunity for fingers to go in and then the door set to like swing shut on them. And it was terrifying to think that a kid could get their finger, snapped in there. And I had a couple of really bold, overconfident kids one year, and they were like messing around with the doors a lot and pretending to like slam them, but not slam them. And then the other kid would try to stop them, but stick their fingers in that space. And it was very nerve-wracking. So I pulled them together, made them, you can imagine these first graders, I had about 8 of them in my mixed age class. I had them circled up and I was like, okay, this pencil is broken, right? The lead isn't working, whatever. So we were going to throw it out, but instead I'm going to give you a demonstration of what happens if, how I've been kept saying, don't put your fingers in there. Oh, we don't play with the doors. It's not safe. Doesn't seem to be making an impression. So I'm going to show you what happens to a pencil if a door slams on it. So first I showed them just the regular like door shut and they saw the dent in it. I'm like, oof. And like they're kind of pulling their fingers in. But then I was like, and you know why I really don't want you to touch the part where the hinges are? Watch this. I put the pencil in. I didn't even slam the door. I just gently closed it. And the pencil made this horrible cracking noise and cracked in half and like pieces went everywhere. And I literally saw the kids with their hands down, like, hands like this, going like this. And then putting their hands either in their pockets or behind them, like, and like kind of like, ooh. And I was like, yeah, you up the door. So sometimes we have to give them those demonstrations, you know. And okay, so Dr. Sheila says, yes, precisely. And oh yeah, so what we're leading to is wanting her to be confident, of course, and open to learning as well. Right. So what I'm saying is that with certain kids who are very headstrong, who come into the world really brave and bold and like they speak their mind and they're going to like have a loud voice in the room, it's just how they are. They also need to understand two things, that like there's a time and place and there's an impact on them, on themselves and others, and we can guide them, but sometimes we have to, when it's not getting through, we have to do something a little bit more demonstrative, like the pencil demo or the doll demo, to get the point across. And I wouldn't say that's not learning. I'd say that's just like applying the right level of intensity to the lesson. So you tried lower intensity, you tried mid intensity, and eventually you might have to do something a little more dramatic. So I would say start with a low, go mid, go high if you need to, as a sort of last step. Let me know if there's Dr. Sheila, if there's a specific thing that you want her to learn too. I can come up with an idea, if the pencil one and the door jam is not your concern, but something else. All right. Yeah. Thanks for coming on live and interacting. It's awesome. We love when people come on. It just makes it much more interesting for the conversation, and I always love supporting people. All right. Here's a new one. This one is from Vero Martin. Let me just make sure I tag this person. So I on Facebook. So this is a question that I really like because it is so relatable, and it's going to bring in some of the questions, some of the intrinsic motivation stuff I was going to be I also wanted for the question on homework. Okay. Let me just keep putting somebody else's name in. Okay. So when we're thinking about motivating kids to do things like chores, and this is for a 9-year-old boy, when asked, and we want creative strategies for motivating without nagging, one of the first things you need to do is make it, again, break a pattern of the nagging. Okay, so breaking the pattern of nagging is on your side of the street. It means you're going to let your child know ahead of time, but that you're not interested in repeating yourself over and over and over again for things that they already know they should do. I'm done with that. Just sort of like you sit down and you're like, hey, I don't like how the homework goes. We always get into these power struggles, and it's not fun for either of us, and often leaves us feeling awful. You can acknowledge that too for the chores, right? In whatever flavor you're experiencing those chores. And so if nagging is it, you might say something like, hey, I've noticed that, for your regular chores, for some reason, we've gotten to this pattern. With a 9-year-old, you can use pattern, right? We've gotten to this pattern where you don't do them until I nag you, until I remind you, and then I have to remind you again, and then I basically nag you, and then you're, like you're doing them finally, but it doesn't feel great because you're like annoyed from being nagged. So like, I don't want to be nagging. You don't want to be hearing nagging. We've got to do better and find a different way. I don't really like this anymore. And so just being open and honest with him about how this is affecting your dynamic, right? And saying like, and acknowledging what's not great for him. Commiserate too, like I mentioned earlier. So once you're past the commiserating stage and you've been able to acknowledge how it's not working, offer, being willing to go first. Like my Coach Imani on my team, Coach Imani Aisha always says, me first, them later. Like, be willing to go first in changing your behavior. And then, and offering that and saying like, look, I won't nag, and like, I won't play this role of like repeating the what you're supposed to do over and over again, but I will help you to remember you have chores to do, but I want to do it in a way that doesn't feel like nagging to you. And so then you might say, how about we, go through the chore list and brainstorm about like how, like other ways that we can be reminded that this needs to be done that doesn't involve me coming over and repeating myself over and over again, and having to escalate things, right? And so there's a whole robust routines process that I lead all my clients through. It's usually the first thing we work on. Month 1 and then also month 7 in the year-long program is all about these robust routines and getting kids on board with them, where they're co-designing the routine with you. And when you help create something, you're a lot more invested in it, and you get to put your input in, like how it's going to go. And one of the things I would be doing for this case is, and for the homework case, both, is saying, well, we don't want to do it the old way. What could we replace that with that would feel better to both of us? And you'll be surprised, 6 to 9 year olds, like I was with them for 10 years as a teacher, and then also, as a consultant now for many, many more years. They they'll come up with ideas that are sometimes better than ours if we're open to trying them. And also, you try it, but then you can also put a limit on it. Okay, we'll try this idea for a week and see what changes. But the most important thing is that you make an agreement of the roles you're going to play and you stick to your side. And you can even remind them, hey, remember, I'm not going to nag. I'm not going to come over and remind. I am, though, supposed to set a timer, give you a heads up that homework's happening, set a timer. And then when the timer goes off, I'm supposed to come and just check in with you. And that's it. That's all I'm doing. I'm not going to say it more than, not going to be involved more than that. That was our plan, right? And your side of it was to, when you hear the timer, get started on your chore without me having to say much except, oh, the timer went off. And that's it. Right. So like there's a coming to, like, kind of coming into the middle of like sharing the responsibility. And eventually you can scaffold to, you don't even need to be involved. But first it's like, how do we go forward together? Okay. So Dr. Sheila says, thanks, the demo is a good suggestion. I want her to hear adults and respect them. Consider that they have value. Yeah. I also think, in a way, and this is not a very popular opinion until you really hear me out, that not all adult opinions are going to be weighed equally by children. I've seen it. I've been in classrooms where I was like interviewing teachers and they would come and do a demo lesson. And you also need to earn certain kids' attention and respect. And it's partly not like proving yourself. It's more about dialing into like attuning to what they need in order to really be with you. Like, do they need stories? Do they need demonstrations, right? Do they need to kinesthetically like touch a thing and feel a thing, and you wait for them to ask a question about the thing? There's a lot of ways that adults can engage with children that will earn their respect and their attention. And it's more often on the adult to figure that out than it is on the kid to respond well to every adult. So I often say, it's like a 70-30. Like, we have to do the work of figuring out what they need. And if they should come and meet us part way. And then eventually it can be more 50-50, and even like them advocating for themselves. So what I've seen is like a kid who's like my stepson, for example, he was really struggling in school because he had an undiagnosed learning challenge, and the teacher wasn't adapting to his learning style, like just wasn't doing it, like it wasn't working, and wasn't making accommodations where he needed, but also didn't have any guidance on that yet. So, but it just was a mismatch, and I watched him I watched him respond so much better to another adult who did figure out what he needed and worked with him. There's so much more trust there. And what I'm pulling forward here is like, there's a lot we can do about it. It's not like sometimes we can point to like the kid, like they need to learn how to respect or they need to learn to listen. And I think it's like also we need to understand how what their motivation map looks like, and what their emotional map looks like how. And oftentimes we don't have tools for that. And that's part of why someone like me gives up teaching teachers mostly and doesn't work with children anymore and focuses on parent development, because it's so hard to like find those tools. And like, if you're not, getting some guidance about it. So here's what I would say is like, look out for signs of like, when does your child give you their full attention? What is happening sensorially? Like in terms of like learning style, like is it auditory? Is it kinesthetic? What's going on when they're really captured? And obviously most kids are pretty enthralled with screen time. So outside of screen time, I'm talking like more like when they're like, they're in the presence of an adult and they stop everything they're doing and they're listening, right? Is it like a subject of high interest that really hooks them in? Like get a sense of your child's maps around these things, and do your part there. And then if they don't meet you there, then, maybe you can point at them and say, wait, are you hungry, angry, lonely, tired? Like what's going on with you that this thing that you usually really respond well to isn't working? Or maybe I need to try something new. So it keeps coming back to us. is what it comes back to. So yeah, I think, making headway there though, like with more of the adults in her life is going to help her be open to respecting different kinds of adults. And so this is a process. I do think that kids listening to adults, I really think the best age you can like expect that most of the time is around 8. And I'll tell you why. Because up until then, most kids have some empathy, but they're not really doing the full cognitive exercise of taking the perspective of somebody else until 7.5. So what really like kind of seals that, it seals it, kind of like graduates them to the stage of their growth where they can really empathize and they can really consider the impact they're having on others in terms of others feeling disrespected, is really that like 8 to 9 years old. And then something really funny happens, which is they enter what's called the age of rudeness. So it's like there's this little sweet spot, like at 8 to 9, and then around 10, they start to reject everything. And it can be a very abrupt transition, but also necessary developmentally, which I might get to in another question here. Dr. Sheila says, I wholeheartedly agree with you. My dad thrives with some adults and not others. Thank you. Yeah. I don't know if did you mean dad Cutter? Thrives with some adults and not others. Thank you. Yeah. So it's human nature, like certain ways work with certain people more than others, right? So these last two I'm going to put up together, and then I'm going to talk about both of them. I think there's something here for everybody. So stay with me, because it's one of these, like, these are like kind of more universal questions. The other ones are a little more age bound, but let's definitely, let's explore that part too. There's a bit of an age aspect, but it's also just sort of raising children in these times. So from Lore says, I just want to make sure I'm not holding my kid back in any way. How do I find ways to supercharge his potential? I love this question. Just so exciting. And then Carrie says, my biggest struggle is trying to figure out how to parent my 3 kids with the parenting style that best matches their developmental age. Any advice? And that's from Carrie for her 6, 8, and 15-year-old. Okay, so let's talk about something really important here, which is supercharging potential while adjusting your parenting style to match their developmental stage. So they're so connected. But, that's why I like these questions, because Carrie's on the right track here, asking about how to match their developmental stage. And when you do that, that does supercharge their potential. So a couple of things. It is worthwhile for every parent and caregiver to get to know the developmental stages. As a matter of fact, it's something that I teach every single year at my graduation call, as we like reevaluate from the year, like what stage has my child been in and what stage are they about to head into. A lot of times it's the reason why parents want to keep going with parent development. I have so many folks who do 2, 3, or 4 years with me. And I think it's because we have this moment of acknowledging, like, wow, we're kind of wrapping up a developmental stage and we're heading into a new one now, and there are going to be new goals, and that's new territory. So first I want to say, like, unless you have put in some effort into understanding the goals of each age and stage, you are going to be aiming too high and too low sometimes, and maybe often. And it's a lot more trial and error than if you have a lot of experience with a certain age group, or you've really consulted with somebody who understands each age and stage. And this is like the thing I think is missing, the biggest piece of like parent curriculum that I think is missing after 2 years old. They're kind of like, let's get you through to the toddler year, or maybe to 3, 0 to 3. And then they're like, okay, go figure it out. Try to be nice to your kid and don't let them get away with too much, And then there's all of these all these different, varying, sometimes conflicting methods and information about what it's supposed to look like after that. And I mean, I think variety is good because our kids need different things. So I guess the background I want you to have is understanding the different stages and what developmentally is happening for them. Like even this piece about empathy, like a lot of parents, yeah, I didn't know going into teaching. I mean, it wasn't even covered in my curriculum barely, it was like a sentence in a textbook, but it really stood out to me. And I've been able to really, move that forward into my understanding and how I coach people, because it's such a turning point, ability to fully empathize and not able to empathize is a big developmental milestone, right? Also, that language piece I was describing about toddlers, about how they can understand sometimes 10 times more than what they can say, and how much that unlocks that age, like really empathizing and acknowledging that and helping them. So I would say get to know the developmental stages, but also hone in your parenting style. And one of the best ways to do that is to understand what you can dial up and dial down in parenting style in terms of level of support and level of demand or structure, and how to bring those things together. And a lot of times we were raised with a model where it's one or the other, like either a lot of demand and very little support, or a lot of support and not a lot of demand. And the blend of the two is sometimes a really foreign idea. And we can actually kind of like pendulum swing back and forth between the two, which is feels uncomfortable and is also hard for the kids. So I think, one of my favorite things to do is to help parents figure out their own balance of the support and demand and find their own authentic parenting style. And there's an exercise I like to bring families through as often as I can when we start working together, to make sure that we have the opportunity, right, to really like have that foundation going forward in that common language. So Carrie, if that's something you're interested in, let me know, because I think that's something that, we could investigate more together. Anytime somebody signals to me that they want to understand more about parenting style, I get really interested in leaning in and supporting you, because that's something that is one of my favorite things to do with parents. So I'd encourage you to sign up for a free session, and take my parenting strengths quiz too, and we can get to the bottom of that. Also, anybody else here who hasn't met with me in the last 6 months, it can also sign up for a quiz or sign up for a session with me. And with 3 kids, you really need it. Like, you need to have a pretty solid footing, or you're well outnumbered, is what I've been finding out there with parents with multiples. I have many that I've worked with three plus kids. And then when it comes to not holding your kid back, I mean, where I tend to go with that is give them the toolboxes, the emotional mastery tools, the motivation mastery tools, help them really get to know themselves. Like, what do they like? What are their preferences? And help them articulate those. Because it's not just achievement, right? It's a lot of it is, the foundation is like self-knowledge, self-management, self-regulation, self-motivation. All these things are those skills that really supercharge us for our potential. And then I think one of the biggest ones is growth mindset. So whatever you can do to keep the whole family in a growth mindset would be very valuable as well. So one tip I could give on that is helping kids and ourselves understand that mood and motivation are 2 things that we can actually do something about. Oftentimes when, especially kids, will feel an emotion and they don't know there's something they can do to feel differently. That doesn't mean make it go away, but it means like feel through it and move to a calmer place where they can then assess what happened and whether something needs to happen because they were sad or angry or scared. And then motivation is one of those that I think also, a lot of adults I know don't realize that motivation is something you can do about. Like, if you have low motivation, there are tools to boost your own motivation intrinsically, which means like from within. It's not just like rewards and consequences. There's a whole lot more. There's all these toolboxes to unpack. So I think, like, not only do these tools get us out of difficult things, they help us then to continue down the path of self-actualization, even into adulthood. So I've often had people come out of my emotional mastery weekend retreat, which is part of my year-long program, and my motivation mastery retreat, which is also a part of the program. They come out of those retreats saying, oh my gosh, like, this isn't just for the kids, is it, Vanessa? And I'm like, why would it be? We're all people, and what we need to know for our children, we need to know for ourselves, because it's sort of our basic baseline, but then there's so much you build off of that baseline. So I would say, if you want to really get into supercharging potential, but also if you're on the other end of it, trying to get out of struggles and conflicts and things like that, difficulties, it's all served by these toolboxes. And along the way, there's processes like robust routines process, clarification of setting of the limits and consequences. There are best practices in solving problems and working through conflicts. And these are all tools. They're just tools. It's like you fill in your toolbox, and next thing you know, like you can tinker at life in this really empowered way, from like a calm place of knowledge and experience eventually. So I really recommend it. It took me about 3 years as a teacher to kind of feel like I had a toolbox that was effective. I don't want it to take 3 years for you. I'd like it to be, 6 months to a year, and you could have a lot more tools and feel a lot more excited and grounded in best practices. And I think every parent deserves it. And yeah, so happy that all of you who could make it to this made it. And let me know if you need anything else, or if there's any takeaways that stood out to you. Please put them in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to wrap up. But and if you haven't yet had a session with me, feel free to hop on my calendar for a complimentary 30-minute session where we'll go over your quiz results. We'll map out that learning plan for you, right? What tools would you want to be putting in your toolbox? And I'll even give you a couple of personal strategies you can try right away. And there'll also be a way for us to see if it's a good fit for us to further work together. But it's my gift to the community to do these calls and yeah, really investigate like what else is possible. It's an exciting prospect, right? To have someone in your corner, like with all the experience that I have, for example, taking a look at what's going on and maybe helping you reveal some things like unconscious agreements and patterns, or helping you unlock something very specific to your child's developmental age. So please take me up on it. I'd be happy to see any of you on my calendar. All right, everybody, lots of love. Oh yeah, one more thing is I do have something exciting that we're going to be announcing soon, something new that's different from these from the Monday mindsets. And yeah, so please stay tuned, keep an eye on your inboxes or your notifications for some exciting announcements coming up with ways for you to participate meaningfully and even get into some games and prizes and be a part of this movement of empowering parents. So looking forward to all of that. Lots of love. Bye for now. Take care. And may you continue to build your skills to be a calm, empowered parent, raising happy, confident, and resilient children. Bye for now. Bye, Alex. Bye, Dr. Sheila. Bye, Gianni. Bye, folks on Facebook and YouTube and replays. See you next time.